Welcome in, everybody, to the CFB Nation All-America podcast. I'm Bill Trocchi, senior editor at sportingnews.com, alongside Bill Bender, our national college football writer at sportingnews.com, and the president of the Football Writers Association of America. We're coming to you live on our CFB Nation YouTube channel again. Thanks to Brian Driscoll over at Irish Breakdown for setting it up for us. If you want to subscribe, go over to YouTube, search CFB Nation, click subscribe, and you're all set. So last week, Bill and I came to you from ACC Media Days in Charlotte. This week, we have a reporter we ran into at ACC Media Days in David Hale from ESPN, who had a very, very busy 4 days in Charlotte. And we are very, very happy that he has found some time to chat with us today. David, welcome in to the CFB Nation All-America podcast.
Thanks for having me. I should be writing stories, but I'd much rather do this. So thank you for allowing me to put off the job that I'm supposed to be doing.
A little lunch break for you. Is that how it's going to work? So I know you and Bill have been friends for a long time. We are going to start off the show like we always started off. Then we're going to get into some ACC topics and college football topics, et cetera, et cetera. We started off with something called Trocchi Trivia. And so we involved the guests. A few months ago, we had your partner in crime, Andrea Adelson, on.
Okay. Well, now there's a bar has been set.
We had an ACC-themed question. Bill beat her. She was very disappointed. So this is going to be your opportunity to stick up for the ACC network right here. So.
All right. Neither of us know what we're talking about, but I'd like to pretend for a little while longer.
All right. So, Trocchi Trivia, we will ask it now. We will revisit it at the end of the show. That's when we will go after the answers. You guys can go head to head. In the last 5 NFL drafts, there have been 9 ACC players taken within the first 20 picks of the first round. Okay. So we'll see how many you guys can get. You go head to head. You can kind of alternate guesses, et cetera, and we'll see how we do there. So in the last 5 NFL drafts, there's been 9 ACC players taken in the top 20 of the first round. So anyway. So David, once again, thank you so much. I told you down in Charlotte, I'll tell our listeners here every Sunday morning after I have been engrossed in college football from noon until past midnight with Bill, editing Bill, watching games. Sometimes he's at a game, sometimes I'm at a game. We pretty much know everything that happened on Saturday. Sunday morning, the first thing I do is I reach for my phone and I check out David Hale's ESPN.com column that summarized everything I already know that happened on Saturday. But because he is such an entertaining writer, it's definitely a must-read for everybody. So,
thank you. I appreciate that somebody is reading.
So Bill, you want to kick us off? You want to?
Yeah, I mean, I don't really want to talk about ACC to start. I saw your tweet last night about. Good. So my guy is Tony Gwynn, and I think you felt the same way. When Ryan Sandberg passed away, I talked to a buddy last night. I said he was basically, in my opinion, when you got baseball cards as a kid, he was the every year National League second baseman card. It was Ozzie Smith, Ryan Sandberg. And so maybe, share with our listeners what Ryan Sandberg means to you. It was a rough week for us 80s kids last week with a lot of icons passing away and obviously one that touched you.
Yeah, well, I was like, oh, we're good. We're not going to talk about ACC. And then you found something more depressing to talk about.
Oh, sorry.
My boyhood idol dying. All right, fine, Bill. Thanks.
You're welcome.
No, look, it's a funny thing. I would guess most athletes don't really get to have that moment where they realize, I guess nobody really realizes at the time, oh, this guy is the reason I started watching sports. But I loved Ryan Sandberg growing up. I was from Philly, and the Phillies very stupidly traded him for Ivan DeJesus along with Larry Boa. 85 was probably my first year I was old enough to really watch and appreciate baseball. And that was, of course, coming off the Ryan Sandberg MVP year. The Cubs were great in 84. And so I was in 85, I said, the Phillies were terrible. I'm a Cubs fan and I'm a Ryan Sandberg fan. Now, I did not realize that would lead to genuinely 30-some years of massive disappointment and misery, which I also passed on to my younger brother. But this was sort of the thing, is the Cubs just sort of become your personality, I think, when you're a fan of them as a kid. And so much of that was based on Rhino. Our friend Joe Posnanski wrote a wonderful tribute to him yesterday too, and just that, if people think about the Cubs as like a team that routinely disappoints, but before Sandberg came along, that wasn't really true. They were just terrible. Like, there was no hope. You couldn't be disappointed because nobody had hope. And I think that's what Ryan Sandberg turned around what it meant to be a Cubs fan. It became cool to be a Cubs fan. It became fun to be a Cubs fan. And that's what I fell in love with. And, down the road, I became a huge Mark Grace fan, and then Sammy Sosa, and then Chris Bryant, and on and on and on down the road. I probably don't watch nearly as much or live and die nearly as much with them as I used to. But yeah, Rhino was the best. And then I got to cover Rhino a little bit when he was in Philadelphia. He took over for Charlie Manuel as the manager of the Phillies, but he was bench coach with Charlie for a year, which happened to coincide with my last year of covering the Phillies beat. And I was a little worried because you're always worried about going to meet like your hero, but also he had kind of a reputation for being a little arm's length with the media when he was a player, and he could not have been more generous with his time, more humble, more like pleasant, more chill, more insightful, just a very thoughtful, smart guy. There's the old saying, never to meet your heroes. I got to meet one of mine, and he was awesome, and I'm very grateful for that opportunity, and very sad for his family, for his friends, for all the folks like me who grew up and became baseball fans because of him.
Speaking of another charming guy with the media, Bill Belichick. I found your Substack. I read your entry, and I don't know why it wasn't headlined the 19 things I thought about during my 19-second stare down with Bill Belichick. So can you please take us in the room and go through that 19 seconds where you guys had a staring contest?
Yeah, so Andrea and I are lucky enough because ESPN is foolish enough to employ us that at ACC Media Days, they'll just cycle everyone through a room that we get. And so we'll get, basically 20 minutes with players, coaches, whatever, without having to put a lot of effort into it. So we're getting a 20-minute sit down with Bill Belichick, which is unheard of, right? So I beforehand, we're kind of like, shoot, now how are we going to handle this, right? You don't want to alienate him right off the bat, but you have an opportunity to ask some hard questions that a lot of other people have not been able to ask. He's not going to be free. Andrea was like, well, we got to prioritize our questions. And I was like, no, we don't. We're going to have trouble having enough questions to fill 20 minutes of time with him. It's not like Dabo where he's going to be very vocal. But, we get to a point where it's like, all right, we got to talk about what happened this offseason. And so I asked him some, Jordan Hudson questions, which he was, largely blew off, but didn't seem upset by. But one of the things that I was sort of taken by, we talked to Jordan Shipp, their wide receiver, before that. And he had said, coach is trying to create a quote family atmosphere, which I know everybody says. But Jordan took it one step further and said, hey, when Mac Brown was coach, Sally, Mac's lovely wife, was around all the time, which she was. And he said, I used to have breakfast with Sally in the players' dining room almost every morning. And I thought, well, yeah, that's a great point. And actually one that I have kind of, I guess, considered that, like, the scandal here is that Belichick's girlfriend is a lot younger than him, but any other coach having his significant other in the building is not a story. It's just normal. And so I'd asked Belichick about this. I said, you want a family, quote unquote, family environment, but I'm certain that you want your players to know you as a person, not just guy with 6 Super Bowl rings. Shouldn't it be no big deal for her to be in the office with you? And he says, of course. And it's just that it felt like an hour. Look, you guys have been to journalism school. You know how they tell you just sit there and be quiet. And eventually somebody becomes so uncomfortable that they'll say something. Well, he was not going to become uncomfortable. And that 20 minutes I thought was going to be too long suddenly felt like not nearly enough time. And so I caved. But we got 19 seconds of full on silence. And I kept thinking, I couldn't break the stare, but I know Andrea's sitting right here. And I'm just like, say something, Andrea, say something, Andrea. And of course, she just hangs me out to dry. So yeah, it was, but it was a life achievement. One of those things, very few people get to have that genuine, quintessential stare down moment with a guy with 6 Super Bowl rings who is quite famous for staring people down and saying nothing. So yeah, no, I feel like I accomplished something.
I would have
You
laughed.
threw up the white flag and said, "So about those quarterbacks."
Yeah. I would have laughed by like second 8 or 9. I've been like, I'm done. Like the poker stare down. I don't do poker stare downs when I play with my buddies. I'm just like, dude, are you in or out? Let's be done.
No.
So we were in that scrum with Belichick, and David, I said it. I thought in my head during, I was like, well, he's done this Super Bowl scrum 12 times or 10, probably not with the Giants as much. So that probably wasn't as big a deal to him as it was to us. But didn't you get the read that this wasn't icy, frosty Belichick from New England? This was I don't think it's lip service to say that he's genuinely excited about what he's doing at the college level. Now we'll see what that is at the end of September, but am I wrong with that read?
It's basically the read that I had too. I mean, look, was there a part of him being more, what's the word, vociferous in the way, he expansive in his answers to questions because he wanted to answer as few questions as possible? Like, that's entirely possible. There was a little bit of a filibuster situation there, but by and large, he seemed friendly. He seemed funny. He seemed, dare I say, charming at times. It was a very down to earth, like even, after our little standoff, like he sat and talked to me and Andrea probably another 8 or 9 minutes before kind of being dragged away. And it was just talking about recruiting, talking about and I think part of the problem here is people want two things from him, which is inside information about his football program or information about his personal life. And he ain't excited to talk about either of those things. But I think if you're just talking about the things that he likes, which is watching film and recruiting players and talking ball, like, I don't think that's hard for him. I think everybody that you talk to who has been inside the locker room speaks of him as a relatively pleasant, funny, affable human being. So I think he puts off one image because, frankly, that is an image that has served him. But I do think there is more to him, and I do think that you get out of it's hard to say there's not a glare on him right now, but there's a glare in the NFL that doesn't exist, and certainly in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. So that was one of the few times where it was probably going to feel like the NFL, and he seemed perfectly at home to me. Yeah.
Yep. Okay. I want to slide over to a pseudo ACC member, and that's Notre Dame. I was looking at, I think it was Brett McMurphy tweeted Brad Powers. I think he's some sort of gambling expert or whatever. Works for Bet the Board, or he runs the bettheboardpod.com and does CFB power ratings and things like that. Anyway, he projected that Notre Dame is one of 5 teams that are going to be favored in every regular season game this year. Their toughest 2 games are the first 2 games of the season on paper for now, at Miami and Texas A&M. New quarterback. I guess my feeling is, what's your take on them? They play a bunch of ACC teams as usual, especially the big one is Miami to start the season. And can they get back not only to the CFP, to the Final Four? What do you think? What's your take on MD?
I think they're going to be pretty good. To me, this is probably the best overall skill talent that they've had. I mean, under Marcus Freeman, that has not been a great wide receiving core under Marcus Freeman. Of course, Jaden Greathouse, I don't know. He had a good playoff. I think that speaks to where people hope he's going to be. Malachi Fields was an absolute catch machine at Virginia last year and comes into the portal. Obviously, everybody knows Jeremiah Love, but I think that's a deep backfield. At quarterback is a question. Now, look, I don't think you let Steve Angeli walk when you don't go into the portal if you don't believe you've got a guy in CJ Carr. So I think they fully believe they've got a guy. Now, would you like your first time starting quarterback to get his feet wet against like Western Kentucky and not Miami and Texas A&M? Yeah, I mean, the schedule probably works against them a little bit that way. But the flip side of that is the rest of the schedule is certainly more than manageable. And the committee certainly tends to be more forgiving of week 1 and week 2 losses than they are later in the season. And all of, I think, public perception tends to evolve as the season goes along too. So, I think this is probably could be, I think the ceiling for Notre Dame, I don't even want to say the ceiling, the offensive ceiling for Notre Dame this year is probably markedly higher than it was last year. That was I don't want to say one-dimensional team last year, but it was Riley Leonard runs the ball, Jeremiah Love runs the ball, and occasionally they can because they have lulled you to sleep with the run, can go over the top and beat you with some throws down the field. But it was not a great dynamic passing attack. I think they can be a good bit better on that front this year. Now, does all of it come together in a run to the national championship game again? A lot of things had to go right for them too. That might not have happened if Carson Beck was healthy in the Georgia game last year. So I think the hype around them is justified. It is not without questions, but I tend to view that as like, again, Notre Dame had opportunities for other quarterbacks if they believed they needed one. I think they're very happy with what they've got at CJ Card.
Well, and so let's switch to Florida State, who I wrote about them, and Mike Norvell was fired up at the podium, less fired up outside the podium. Tommy Castellanos is backing up. Well, here, I'll say this first. Like, when they were making a big deal about the video with Isaiah Horton, I was like, who cares? They're working out. You talk to your buddies when you work out. Now, when he backed it up in the On3.com interview, I said, maybe not say that. And I know they wouldn't have said that if they were playing against Nick Saban. So, what is the medium for Florida State? You go from 13-2 in wins. I mean, are we just looking at 8-4 and everything's fine?
Well, first of all, I think on the Tommy Castellanos things, and I'm incredibly dubious of his ability to change Florida State's fortunes this year, and we'll get to that, I guess. But just on those comments, I started very much like, what are you doing? This is just a stupid thing to do. And then you start talking to Florida State players, and you realize how desperate they were to talk about anything that wasn't last year's 2-10 team. And so in some ways, like, changing the topic and changing it to a topic of, hey, we're actually good and we think we're good, like, that was probably a net positive for Florida State. And as Mike Norvell said, like, if this is what Alabama needs to get motivated for this game, I feel pretty good about our chances anyway. So, I'm not really rolling my eyes so much at it anymore as what he's saying. What I'm rolling my eyes at is, he's a one-dimensional quarterback. And I know he doesn't want to hear that, but that's just a fact. And Florida State really struggled on both sides of the ball last year, but so much of the offensive struggles came from having the wrong quarterback. And if you step in the time machine and go back to spring of, or I guess January of 2024, they're in the mix to get Cam Ward. It's them in Miami, and they didn't want to ante up as much as Miami was willing to. Well, how much would they pay to get that back now? Because that was a problem. And then, DJ Uyunglele, by all accounts, a good dude who got along well with people, not nearly as vocal as Tommy Castellanos, but certainly came with his share of baggage. I would argue less baggage than Tommy Castellanos comes in with. I just have my doubts about how all of this is going to work offensively with Castellanos, Norvell, Gus Malzahn, a completely new look offensive line. I started going through their schedule, and I think there is certainly a non-zero possibility that's a 9-3 team. I think there is certainly a non-zero possibility it's a 4-8 team. And a lot of it sort of depends. I mean, look, none of us, even on our worst, most pessimistic day, would have guessed 2-10 last year. What does it take for Mike Norvell to survive all of this? I think 8-4, probably maybe even 7-5. They say, well, the number's big. They made progress. We'll keep them. But there is certainly, if you watched last year, it is impossible to look at this roster this year and say, well, there's no chance that happens again. I don't think they go 2-10 again, but I think it could go not great again.
I mean, you say Castellanos is a one-dimensional quarterback. That dimension is really, really good, though. I mean, he was amazing at Boston College before O'Brien got there. I thought
and DJ was a zero-dimensional quarterback by the end. So I do, and I think at the very least, what his mobility does, Castellanos' mobility does, is allow Florida State to run the ball in a way that they could not last year. So the key then is don't fall behind. Don't allow the opponent to take away Castellanos' strength. And if they can do that, great. But that's a lot of other things around Castellanos have to go well too.
So you had an interesting post on your Substack about Florida State and their collapse, and then potentially rebounding this year, and what it's looked like in college football over the last 20 years. And it's getting more volatile. And I think that's not surprising. You had some data to back it up, small sample, but still it is going to be more volatile. I do think Florida State is is the perfect example of jumping up and down. And do you think we're going to see let's take it back a second. Like in your data, I think you said more teams that had a dramatic fall off bounced back the next year than not. And
Right.
do you see Florida State could fall into that category?
Yeah, I should have reread this, but something to the effect, the two big takeaways that happened. I went through 20 years of Power 5 data to look for any teams that had a year-over-year 6-win decline in wins. And the crazy thing is, and this was my first takeaway, is it basically didn't happen at all until around 2016-ish. And last year, it happened 5 times, 5 different teams, not just Florida State. Now, Florida State was the worst example of it, but it's happening more. And I think intuitively that makes sense, right? Like rosters are thinner because of the portal. You have more turnover. And portal recruiting is different than high school recruiting. Instead of spending 3 years talking to a guy, you might spend 3 days talking to a guy, 3 hours talking to a guy. So, the room for these things to happen, I would be surprised if we don't see another Florida State situation happen in the next year or two, even though that had never really happened before. But the flip side of that, the other side of that is usually when the pendulum goes from here to here, it swings back somewhere in the middle here. And so I think on average, if my numbers are coming off the top of my head are correct, those teams in that data collection improved by about 3 wins year over year on average. So, all right, that gets Florida State to 5. Is that enough for people to be happy? I highly doubt it. But about a third of the teams that I looked at improved by 5 or 6 wins. And so if you do 6 wins and they get to 8-4, yeah, I think most Florida State fans would say it's not where we want to be, but it's enough proof in the pudding that we're getting back to where we want to be. And maybe it is, or maybe it is just regression to the mean, which is everybody's who knows math's favorite way of explaining why things in football make no sense from year to year.
Well, one more thing with Florida State, then I'll let Bill, you take it. Just this, Norvell with his like yelling at the podium and like Mr. giving a halftime speech to the media, and it was weird and everything, whatever. And I talked to the Florida State guys, and they're all like, "Oh, he's like that every day. This wasn't an act. Yeah. He's like all this." And Bill and I were talking about it. It's like that's great and everything, and it can be inspiring. But when you get to 2-5, it can turn into 2-10 because it's like, oh my God, I can't take this anymore. So I think that little enthusiasm piece is a blessing and can be a curse too.
And that's when I say the thing about Castellanos, which I think is in some ways its own bit of like inserting sort of not proven enthusiasm into a program is, I think it's in retrospect all well and good until they go play Alabama. And if they get the crap beaten out of them, all of the things that he said are going to come back to haunt them. And so much of like, I think if you look back at what happened to Florida State last year, I asked Mike Norvell this and he downplayed it, but it's still sort of my pet theory is if they get off the field in the fourth quarter against Georgia Tech, kick a field goal and win that game, I think things look a lot different. Were they a great team last year? No, but they probably could have been 8-4 last year. And just when the snowball started rolling down the hill, there was no one to stop it. And I mean, you could just watch the body language on the sidelines, watch Mike Norvell's body language. I've joked with him. It's, those the pictures where they show the president on day one and when he leaves office and it looks like he aged 50 years. That's Mike Norvell, who is still a much better looking guy than I am, definitely looked like he was ground down by all of the negativity and terrible things that happened last year. So, yeah, I mean, a big thing is you can't let that snowball start getting some momentum going down the hill because if you don't stop it when it starts rolling, it gets bigger and bigger and harder to stop.
Cool. I don't have anything else. We can go to the Troche trivia.
Let's touch one real quick on the ACC's huge opening weekend, right? So it's Friday night.
You can't not have a Clemson LSU question in here before.
Well, right, then I'll ask that one then. And I'll tie it into that first weekend. Yeah, it's huge, but Dabo did downplay Death Valley 1, Death Valley Junior, Death Valley 2, whatever. My read, David, was he knows he's got the cards. Second poker analogy of this podcast. He knows he's got a good hand. He was kind of like, we could lose to Troy. Do you think his mood is a reflection of this team that he has back that is fully capable of not just winning the ACC, but perhaps winning a national championship? And how important is that LSU game for that perception, knowing they lost 3 games to SEC schools last year?
Yeah, I'm probably more skeptical of Clemson than most people seem to be at this point. I look back at last year and I say the Georgia game, they got destroyed. I know the final scores looked close, but the Louisville and Texas games were not close. They had chances, but they were not close. South Carolina game, they gave away probably, but they should have been better. They probably would have lost the Pitt game if Pitt was not like the Black Knight in Holy Grail, like just playing with like one arm left. To me, there's, I think, reasonable questions about Clemson, but they have a lot of horses. And you're right. I think the Tom Allen hire is a complete change in the culture of that defensive side of the ball, which is necessary. And, it's funny because, Bill, you talked about the very calm, optimistic, almost confident demeanor of Clemson. Well, Brian Kelly was basically the opposite. I mean, he said, I've really never done this in my career where we put so much focus on one game, but because of how our openers have gone since I've been here, and frankly, going back to before he was there, he has felt a need to put an extra special focus on this game. And so you have to wonder, and I think so much of it will come down to kind of how that game starts, because you look back at the Georgia game for Clemson last year, and they just struggled so much shooting themselves in the foot in the first half. And then the walls came down in the third quarter. And LSU, like, you got all this focus on it. Well, you get punched in the mouth in the first quarter. What's going to be their response? To me, I think, look, these are in my mind two of the 5 or 6 best teams in the country going into the season. I think this is going to be an elite level game. But would it surprise me if like the ball kind of gets rolling the wrong way for one of those teams and things fall apart? I wouldn't be shocked, because I think both of them are they're coming at it from two opposite directions, but both with a lot to prove.
So that's the Saturday night game on opening weekend. Friday night, we got Georgia Tech, Colorado. Sunday night, we got Miami, Notre Dame. Monday night, we got North Carolina, TCU. Which one are you going to be most intrigued with of those three?
Look, LSU Clemson to me is the best of those games, because I think that those are the two teams. Like, I would draft those two first in the draft of all the teams that are playing. I mean, I'm fascinated by what North Carolina is going to look like. I don't have high expectations for them, but I have no clue. I mean, they're a complete who knows. But I will put a little bit on this, that I think the Georgia Tech Colorado game should be getting more attention than it is, for two reasons. One, Colorado is a little bit of an unknown. Like, what does that program look like without two absolute marquee superstars on the football field for them? And also because I think Georgia Tech's going to be pretty good. And I mean, it's just sort of culturally, they're the antithesis of, Deion, flash and style and pomp and circumstance. They are nose in the dirt, angry, mean, physical, tough, Brent Key style team.
Brent Key wants to play in Piedmont Park, man. He doesn't even need a football stadium.
That's right. So I think, when you add all that together, to me, that's going to be a really fun, interesting game. It's not going to highlight anybody's week one schedule, I don't think, but it's going to be an awfully good one in my mind.
No doubt. So, all right, well, let's get back to the Troche trivia. Then, David, you can get back to writing all these stories for ESPN.com. So in the last 5 NFL drafts, there have been 9 ACC players taken with the first 20 picks of the first round. How many can you name? We'll do this. We'll do, David, you say a name, you have a guess, Bender can have a guess. We'll go back and forth, and then we'll see who stalls out first. So,
all right. So this would be just making sure I'm clear, the 21, 22, 23, 24, and 25 drafts, right? All right.
Correct.
So I'll go with the easiest one, which is Trevor Lawrence.
Trevor Lawrence, 2021, went number 1 overall.
I have 8 names listed, so you're counting on your partner for one here. I'll go with the other easiest name, Cam Ward.
Cam Ward from Miami, number 1 as well. So the easy ones are out of the way.
This isn't a number 1, but we'll stick in the same position. Drake May.
Drake May, 3 overall in the 2024 draft to the Patriots.
Man, I don't know if Pickett's top 20, so I don't know if I can say it. Can I get was he top 20 , David?
Kenny Pickett, 20th overall.
Yeah, I knew he was right on the fence.
In the 2022
then it counts.
NFL draft. So you guys are 4 down and 5 still on the board.
AJ Terrell from Clemson.
AJ Terrell from Clemson he was outside the top 20.
Was he?
We get 3 strikes though. So that's 1 strike. We're good.
Where was he picked? No, he was. Oh, he was the 2020 draft. That's my problem. I thought he was 21.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
All right, close.
I got Akeem Iguano, that massive NC State tackle, right?
Yeah.
2022, he was number 6.
He's
Number
the Panthers
6
took
overall
him.
to NC
Panthers
State.
took him their left tackle. Yes, Ekim. Yeah,
I probably butchered his last name. I'm sorry.
Okwanu.
That's all right. I'm sure that we're all learning on the job here. I think this guy would be in Kenny Pickett territory, but I'm going to go with that Kalijah Cansey from Pitt.
Kalijah Clancy, 19 overall in the 2023 draft to the Bucks.
All right.
You are correct.
I've got this is the last guy that I know for sure is inside the top 20, Jared Verse.
Jared Verse, also 19th overall, 2024 draft to the Rams. So Bender, you're 1, 2, 3.
Omarion Hampton from Carolina.
Orion Hampton, 22 overall. I am
So we got-
sorry, David.
Right.
He is outside the top 20. Close.
I have 2 names listed, and I think one's inside and one's outside. Is ETN top 20?
Travis
I feel like he
Etienne,
was like the end of the first round.
25th overall in the 2021
Then I'm
draft.
just gonna-
Jaguars. Your first miss, Bill. All right, back to you, David.
I'm thinking. So he said Jared Verse. I'm thinking Jared Johnson or Jermaine Johnson, but I think he was outside the top 22. Oh my
Well,
gosh!
basically,
Oh
we're missing
wait,
two-
wasn't there?
We're
Who was the
missing 2
Boston
names.
College guy? There's a Boston College guy, right?
You are correct.
Offensive lineman.
You are correct.
Oh God, his name is completely escaping me.
Chargers
Johnson.
took him 17 overall. You're getting half
It's like-
credit for this.
Yeah,
Zion Johnson.
Zion
Oh,
Johnson.
there
Yeah,
it
Zion. How did I forget Zion? All right, Johnson.
Zion Johnson. Very good. All right. One name still left on the board.
I'm going to guess, and I don't think it's right because I think he slid Belton. Anthony Belton. Was that his name? Louisville guy?
I don't have him as a first rounder.
Well, then he definitely slid.
This player was a 2021 draft. He was taken by the Miami Dolphins. 18th overall.
Tight end. I mean, I guess this is a tight end.
Defensive end. Made his bones.
Oh, I know. It's the dude who transferred from UCLA, right?
I know his name. Do you want me to get the name?
Jalen Phillips.
Jalen
Phillips, right?
Phillips. You got it.
That's
Yep,
it.
there you go.
Jalen Phillips. Very good. All right. Great
Did
job.
I do better
guys.
than Andrea?
Sorry?
Did I do better than Andrea?
I think
I'm
we
going
only
to call this a draw. So, yes, you did get better than
we missed one. I think our question was easier. It was something of like name all the teams that have participated in the ACC championship in the last decade. It was something in that neighborhood.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it was
Well,
hard.
the Atlantic would have been easy on that. It was, and then you just named the whole coast.
But name the division.
kept
And then
going.
it was-
Or maybe you had to be in it twice. I can't remember what the question was.
It
but
was
yeah,
something in that neighborhood. Yeah.
You got
That
stumped.
was a tough one, man.
She was good. Well, Ben, in your defense, David, Bender covers the draft for us too. So you got a little extra layer to overcome.
I've always got an extra layer to overcome. That's the story of my life.
Anyway, all right. Well, that was really fun. Thanks again for coming on, David. Thank you to everyone for listening to the CFB Nation All-America podcast on Spotify and Apple Podcasts and watching on our YouTube channel. Thank you to Irish Breakdown, your source for Notre Dame football information. Enjoy the rest of your day, and we will see you soon.